My twin forced me to pretend to be her in her relationship. Her fiancé ended up falling in love with me. I should have said no. The second Claire asked me to do this, every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse. But as always, I ignored my instincts and let her convince me. Because saying no to Claire had never been easy. I stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the silky, white blouse she'd tossed at me. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, trying to keep the nerves from my voice. Claire rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, you're making this a thing. It's not a big deal, Liz. You're literally just dropping by, saying hi to Lucas, and feeding my dog." My fingers hesitated over the buttons. "Then why can't you do it?" She huffed dramatically. "Because I need a break. I just need to have some fun without being watched like a hawk." Her perfectly manicured nails flitted over the makeup on her vanity, idly picking through lipstick shades before settling on a bold red. And Lucas is, like, borderline obsessed with details. If I'm not at home for 2 nights, he'll ask 1,000 questions. I swallowed hard. "And you don't think he'll notice this?" Claire turned to me then, placing her hands on my shoulders, her expression softening in a way that always made me weak to her demands. "He won't. You know how similar we are. Besides, you're so much better at playing me than you think." I wasn't. Not really. Claire had always been the outgoing one, the social butterfly who charmed everyone in the room. I had spent most of my childhood in and out of hospitals, battling an immune disorder that left me weak and constantly under care. While Claire learned how to dance at parties and command attention with a flick of her hair, I had learned how to listen, how to observe from the sidelines. We had the same face, the same eyes, the same long, dark hair, but we were nothing alike. Still, I sighed and buttoned up the blouse.
"Fine.
But I'm just saying hi and feeding Bubbles. That's it." Claire grinned, pressing a kiss to my cheek like a queen bestowing her blessing. "You're the best, Lizzie." As I drove to Lucas's house, anxiety coiled tight in my stomach. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But Claire had always been good at convincing me to bend my morals for her. "It's harmless," I repeated to myself. "Just for a couple of days." When I pulled into his driveway, the nerves kicked up a notch. The house was elegant yet welcoming, much like the man himself. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, keys in hand. The door opened before I even had the chance to knock. "Hey, babe," Lucas said, smiling. My heart leapt to my throat. I had seen Lucas a handful of times before, at family events, through Claire's gushing texts, in passing moments where we exchanged polite hellos. But standing here, with his stormy gray eyes fixed on me, I realized how much more intense he was up close. I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as fake as it felt. "Hey." His brows furrowed slightly as he leaned in to kiss me. I stiffened, barely managing to turn my head at the last second, so that his lips brushed my cheek instead of my mouth. "Everything okay?" he asked, pulling back. I nodded quickly, stepping inside before I gave myself away. "Yeah, just tired." Lucas shut the door behind me, watching me carefully. "Long day." I hummed in agreement, avoiding his gaze as I made a beeline for the kitchen. I should feed Bubbles. Lucas followed, his eyes never leaving me. I could feel the weight of his scrutiny as I grabbed the dog food from the cabinet and poured it into the bowl. Bubbles, a tiny Pomeranian with more energy than any dog that Small should have, yipped excitedly and spun in circles before diving into her meal. Lucas leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. "You didn't kiss me." I froze. Slowly, I turned to face him, forcing an awkward laugh.
"What?"
He tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. "You always kiss me when you come over. It's practically the first thing you do."
"Shit. Think, Liz."
I guess I'm just out of it today." I forced a yawn. Like I said, long day. Lucas didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. It was such a simple touch, but it sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "You seem different," he murmured. "Quieter." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you mean." He studied me for another long moment before finally nodding, though something in his expression told me he wasn't entirely convinced.
All right.
Let's sit down for dinner then. Dinner. Of course. Claire hadn't mentioned that. I mentally scrambled, trying to recall what she had said about her routine with Lucas. I knew she was a picky eater, hated mushrooms, and had a weakness for red wine. I could fake my way through this. Or so I thought. Because the moment Lucas placed a plate of pasta in front of me, I grabbed the fork and instinctively twirled it in a way that Claire never did. I took a bite, savoring the rich sauce, before reaching for my napkin and dabbing at the corner of my mouth. It was a small thing, but Lucas noticed. "You're using a napkin?" he teased, amusement flickering in his gaze. "Since when?" My stomach dropped.
Crap.
Claire had terrible table manners. She was the type to wipe her mouth with the back of her hand and laugh about it. I forced a chuckle, trying to mimic her carefree attitude. Just felt like switching things up. Lucas narrowed his eyes slightly, but he let it go.
For now.
As we finished eating, he reached for my hand across the table. I hesitated for only a second before allowing him to hold it, guilt creeping up my spine. He was warm, steady, and so incredibly kind. And I was lying to him. This was a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. And the worst part? I had no idea how to stop it. Lucas had always been perceptive, but I didn't think he'd notice this quickly. The next morning, as I groggily stepped into the kitchen, he was already awake, sipping coffee and watching me with a knowing gaze. "You're up early," I murmured, grabbing a mug to pour myself some coffee. "I could say the same about you." He tilted his head, studying me. "You never get up before me."
Crap.
Another thing I didn't know about Claire's habits. I forced a chuckle, brushing past him. I guess I just slept well. Lucas leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his gaze never wavering. "Liz." My heart stopped. "What did you just call me?" The weight of Lucas's gaze pinned me in place.
Liz.
He had called me Liz. My mind raced, scrambling for a way out, a way to twist his words into something harmless. Maybe he had misspoken. Maybe he was testing me. Or maybe, just maybe, he already knew the truth. I forced a nervous laugh, gripping my coffee mug tighter. "What did you just say?" Lucas didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just stared at me with that unnerving, calculating expression that made my stomach churn. I said, "Claire." "Liar." But I couldn't call him out on it without exposing myself. I swallowed and nodded, acting like I had misheard.
Oh.
Right. He continued watching me as I sat at the breakfast table, my appetite non-existent. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Lucas wasn't an easy man to fool. Claire had warned me that he was observant, but I had underestimated just how much. "I was thinking we could go out today," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "Just a little date. You've been acting off lately, and I thought maybe some fresh air would help."
Shit.
A date? Claire hadn't prepped me for this. I was only supposed to drop in, feed Bubbles, and leave. But now Lucas was setting plans. Plans I couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. I forced a smile. "That sounds great." His lips curved into a slow smile, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. "Perfect. Let's get ready." We drove to a small lakeside park just outside the city. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling my lungs. I tried to relax, to remind myself that as long as I stuck to Claire's usual habits, I could pull this off. But Lucas was studying me. Every movement, every reaction. "You're quieter today," he said as we walked along the path. "More thoughtful." I swallowed. "Just thinking." He hummed in response. "About what?" "About the fact that I'm living a lie, and you're going to hate me when you find out." Instead, I shrugged. "Nothing important." Lucas stopped walking. I took 2 steps before realizing he had halted. When I turned to face him, my stomach clenched at the way he was looking at me, intense, focused. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "With me," he clarified. "Are you happy?" The answer should have been simple. Yes. Of course. But I wasn't Claire. And I had no idea how she truly felt about Lucas. I had no script to follow, no rehearsed lines to mimic. And in that silence, in that fraction of a second where I hesitated, I saw something shift in his gaze. Like he had just confirmed a suspicion he didn't even know he had. I forced a smile, but it was too late. Of course I'm happy. Lucas didn't respond right away. He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. It was such a small, intimate touch, but it sent a wave of guilt crashing over me. "Let's sit for a bit," he said, leading me to a wooden bench by the water's edge. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the lake stretching endlessly before us. The air was thick with tension, unspoken words pressing between us, like an invisible barrier. Then Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Claire." I stiffened. "Yeah." He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. "If there was something you wanted to tell me, something important, you'd say it, right?" I swallowed hard. "Of course." He held my gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right." But I could see it. The crack in his trust. The doubt flickering in his eyes. And I knew then, this wouldn't last much longer. The facade was breaking. And I had no idea how to stop it. By the time we got back to the apartment, my nerves were frayed. The weight of Lucas's lingering stares, his carefully worded questions, it was all pressing down on me. I had always been good at slipping into different roles, but this was different. Lucas wasn't just some stranger I was fooling. He was my sister's fiancé, and I was playing a dangerous game. I forced a smile as I stepped into the living room, but my pulse pounded in my ears. "I think I'll take a shower," I said quickly, needing a moment alone to breathe, to figure out my next move. Lucas nodded, but his gaze followed me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I hurried into the bathroom, closing the door behind me and gripping the sink. My reflection stared back at me, eyes wide with panic. "You have to get out of this before it's too late."
But how?
I couldn't just disappear. That would only make Lucas more suspicious. Claire wasn't due back yet, and if I bailed now, she'd be furious. I had to ride this out, keep up the act a little longer. I turned on the shower, hoping the steam would clear my head, but even as the hot water pounded against my skin, I felt like I was drowning. The walls were closing in. My own lies were suffocating me. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, Lucas was sitting on the couch, his phone in hand. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he said casually. "Claire's mom called. Wanted to check in." My stomach twisted.
Shit.
I nodded, forcing indifference. "Oh, what did she say?" "She asked about the bakery." My breath caught in my throat. Claire worked at a bakery. I knew that, but I had no idea what she had told her mother recently, what details she had shared. I swallowed. "Yeah, work's been busy." Lucas tilted his head slightly. "That's funny. She said she talked to your boss yesterday, and he mentioned you took some time off." Trap. Every muscle in my body tensed, but I forced a laugh. "Oh, right. I forgot I mentioned that. Just needed a little break." Lucas's eyes darkened, and I knew he didn't believe me. "You forgot," he echoed, standing up slowly. "Claire, you never forget details like that." My throat went dry. "Well, you've been acting different." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Quieter. More considerate. I blinked. "Considerate?" He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "You cleaned the kitchen without thinking. You said please to the delivery guy. You've been looking at me like I'm a stranger." My stomach churned.
Shit. Shit. Shit.
I needed to fix this.
Fast.
I forced a laugh. "Lucas, you're overthinking this. I've just been tired. That's all." His eyes bore into mine. "You're not Claire, are you?" The room went silent. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath catching in my throat. I had no way out. No excuse. No lie strong enough to undo what he already knew. And then, before I could even process what was happening, Lucas turned and walked toward the door. "I need some air." And just like that, he was gone. I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling. It was over. He knew. Maybe he didn't have all the details yet, but the doubt had settled in. He would figure it out completely soon enough. Claire was going to kill me. The next few hours were torture. I kept expecting the door to swing open, for Lucas to come storming in with accusations. But he didn't. The silence was worse than any confrontation. When my phone rang, I nearly dropped it. Claire's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. Hey, what the hell is going on? Her voice was sharp, panicked. Lucas just called me. My stomach sank. What did he say? That something's wrong. That I'm acting different. Liz, did you screw this up? I swallowed hard. He was going to figure it out eventually.
No.
He wasn't, unless you let him. The disappointment in her voice cut deeper than I expected. Claire, fix this. Her voice was cold. I don't care how, but fix it. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pulse thundering in my ears. I was losing control of everything, and I had no idea how to fix it. The next morning, the weight of Lucas's suspicions settled over me like a heavy fog. I had barely slept, tossing and turning as I replayed our last conversation in my mind. He knew something was off. I had seen it in his eyes. And if I didn't do something soon, everything would come crashing down. I needed to talk to Claire. Again. After pacing the living room for nearly an hour, I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. It rang and rang before she finally picked up, her voice clipped and annoyed.
What? She snapped.
I swallowed hard. We have a problem. No, you have a problem, she shot back. You were supposed to keep things together for a little while longer. I just needed more time. Time for what? My patience was wearing thin. Lucas is already doubting everything. He basically knows I'm not you. Silence stretched between us before she let out a sharp breath.
Fine.
I'll handle it.
How?
I'll think of something. Just don't make things worse. The call ended, leaving me with nothing but the steady drum of my own panic. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, but it was pointless. Lucas barely spoke to me. Every glance he sent my way was calculated, suspicious. He wasn't just doubting me anymore, he was waiting for me to slip up. And I did.
It was a small thing.
Stupid, really. I had always known Claire took her coffee black, but when Lucas set a mug in front of me, I instinctively reached for the sugar. His eyes narrowed instantly. Since when do you take sugar? I froze, my fingers tightening around the spoon.
Oh.
Just lately. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, studying me with quiet intensity. Then, as if he had reached a decision, he set his cup down and stood. Come with me. My pulse spiked. What? Why? I just need to show you something. Every part of me screamed that this was a trap, but I forced myself to nod and follow him out the door. We ended up at a small cafe a few blocks from the apartment. It was one of those cozy spots with warm lighting and mismatched furniture, the kind of place I would have loved to visit on my own. But right now, all I could focus on was the way Lucas kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to confess something. We sat at a corner table, and he wasted no time cutting to the chase. I know you're not Claire. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unshakable. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Lucas sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I knew something was off from the beginning, but I wanted to believe I was wrong. He shook his head. Turns out I wasn't. Panic clawed at my chest. Lucas, Why? His voice was quiet, but there was a sharp edge to it. Why would you pretend to be her? What the hell is going on? I swallowed hard. It's complicated. He let out a humorless laugh. No kidding. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Claire needed a break. She said she just needed some time to figure things out, and she asked me to cover for her. Lucas's jaw tightened. Figure what out? I hesitated. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. I don't know. I lied. She didn't tell me everything. He studied me for a long moment. So, you just went along with it? I nodded. She's my sister. I thought I was helping her. Lucas exhaled sharply, his hands clenching into fists before he forced them open again. Do you have any idea what this means? What you've done? I swallowed the lump in my throat. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the hurt in his eyes was undeniable. And Claire, she's been lying to me this whole time. My stomach twisted. I'm sorry. Lucas stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he pushed his chair back and stood. I need some time to think. I nodded, knowing there was nothing more I could say. As he walked away, I felt the first crack in my heart. This wasn't just Claire's lie anymore. It was mine, too. I spent the next few days drowning in silence. Lucas didn't call, didn't text, didn't even show up at the apartment. I had no idea where he was or what he was thinking, but I knew one thing for sure. I had destroyed something precious. Claire, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had happened. She returned without warning one afternoon, sauntering into the apartment with a shopping bag in one hand and a smug look on her face. So, she said, dropping onto the couch. How bad is it? I stared at her in disbelief. Are you serious? She shrugged. Lucas always overreacts. Give him a few days. My chest tightened. He's not overreacting, Claire. We lied to him. You lied to him. She rolled her eyes. And what? Now you're suddenly the saint in this situation. You agreed to help me, remember? That was before I knew how much this would hurt him. I shot back, my voice rising. Before I knew how much I stopped myself too late. Claire's eyes gleamed with amusement. Oh. You're in love with him. I looked away, my face burning. It doesn't matter now. She let out a low whistle. Wow. This just got a lot messy, eh? I glared at her. You think? Claire sighed dramatically and leaned back. Look, I didn't mean for this to turn into a disaster. I wasn't ready for the life I was building with him. Anger bubbled inside me. Then why did you let him believe you were? Her expression hardened. Because I thought I could be. And then, when I realized I wasn't, I didn't know how to walk away. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling sharply. And now? What do you want now? Claire studied me for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. But I do know Lucas isn't going to forgive either of us easily. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep. I have to fix this. Claire's lips twisted into a smirk. Good luck with that. 2 days later, I finally worked up the courage to find Lucas. If he wasn't coming to me, I had to go to him. I found him at a bar, sitting alone with a glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked tired, his usually sharp features dulled with exhaustion. Lucas, I said hesitantly, stepping beside his table. He didn't look at me. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. He let out a bitter laugh. I think you've seen enough, don't you? I bit my lip, my stomach twisting. I'm sorry. He finally turned to face me, his eyes cold. For what exactly? For lying? For pretending to be someone you're not? Or for making me fall for you under false pretenses? Tears burned at the back of my eyes. I never meant for that to happen. But it did. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. And now I don't even know what's real. I swallowed hard. Me. I'm real. Everything we talked about, everything we shared, it was me, Lucas. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. I don't know if I can believe that. Pain stabbed through my chest. Please, I whispered. Just tell me what I can do to fix this. Lucas sighed, pushing back from the table. I don't think you can. And with that, he stood and walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of the bar, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. This wasn't just about a lie anymore. It was about trust. And I had shattered his. The days after my confrontation with Lucas felt like a slow-moving storm. The weight of his rejection, of the disappointment in his eyes, clung to me like a second skin. I had shattered his trust, and no amount of apologies could glue it back together. I avoided Claire. I couldn't stomach looking at her, not after everything. But, of course, she didn't take the hint. She knocked on my bedroom door one evening, her voice deceptively light. You can't just hide in there forever. I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched around the blanket. Watch me. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside uninvited. This isn't healthy, you know. It was just a breakup. I shot up, rage igniting inside me. It wasn't just a breakup, Claire.
You know that.
She arched a brow. I do.
You used me.
And I let you. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I trusted you, and now I've lost everything. For the first time, Claire's smug confidence wavered. You haven't lost everything. You still have yourself.
And you know what?
Maybe Lucas wasn't meant for either of us. I stared at her, aghast. How can you be so casual about this? He loved you. He was going to marry you. Claire scoffed. No, he wasn't. He was in love with an idea of me. A version of me I could never be. And you? You were just convenient. The words cut deep. I swallowed back tears. Get out. She sighed. You're being dramatic. Get out. For once, Claire listened. She left without another word, and I was alone again. Exactly how I deserved to be. With nowhere else to turn, I packed my bags and left the apartment. I couldn't stand living under the same roof as Claire. Not when she could brush off our betrayal like it was nothing. I needed to start over. My first instinct was to run. Find some faraway town where no one knew my name, where I could pretend none of this had happened. But that wasn't realistic. Instead, I found myself at the one place that had always offered me solace, my aunt's bookstore. Aunt Lillian had always been the kind of person who saw right through me. She took one look at my face when I walked in and said, "Well, that bad, huh?" I forced a smile. That obvious? She patted the counter.
Sit.
Tell me everything. And so I did. Every word, every regret, every stupid decision. By the time I finished, my chest felt lighter, but the ache remained. Lillian sighed, stirring her tea. You can't change the past, sweetheart. But you can decide where you go from here. I looked down. Where can I go? Lucas won't forgive me. Claire, I don't even know who she is anymore. And what about you?
Who do you want to be?
I hesitated. For so long, I had let my sister define me, let circumstances push me into shadows. I had let myself become an accessory in my own life. Maybe it was time to change that. Aunt Lillian squeezed my hand. You're stronger than you think. Take this as a chance to prove it, to yourself, not to Lucas, not to Claire. You. I nodded, swallowing hard. I think I need to get away for a while. She smiled. Then go. Find yourself again. And when you're ready, come home. I left the city that weekend. No grand gestures, no dramatic goodbyes. Just a quiet departure, a single bag slung over my shoulder as I boarded a train to a small coastal town I had once visited as a child. It was impulsive, yes, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was making a choice that wasn't about Claire. That wasn't about fixing things. That wasn't about anyone but me. The sea air was crisp when I arrived. The sound of waves crashing against the shore replaced the static in my head. I found a tiny rental by the water and spent my days reading, working odd jobs, and relearning who I was without my sister's shadow looming over me. It wasn't easy. Some days, the guilt threatened to drown me. Some nights, I dreamed of Lucas, of the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, before everything had crumbled. But every morning, I reminded myself that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it. Months passed, the ache dulled, and in its place, something new began to bloom.
Hope.
Then one evening my phone rang. It was Claire. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, I took a deep breath and picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice unusually hesitant. I know I don't deserve to ask you this, but could you come home?" My stomach twisted.
Why?
She sighed. "I need you to see something." I hesitated. "Claire, please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe it was time to finally face everything I had left behind. As my train pulled into the city the next morning, I had no idea what awaited me. But I had a feeling my life was about to change all over again. The city skyline loomed before me as the train pulled into the station. My stomach twisted with unease, a familiar heaviness settling in my chest. I hadn't set foot here in months, and returning felt like stepping into a past I had fought so hard to leave behind. I hadn't even unpacked my emotions from Claire's unexpected call. She had been vague, too vague. A part of me feared some fresh betrayal waiting on the other side. But the other part, the one that still longed for some semblance of the relationship we once had, convinced me to come back. As I stepped off the train, Claire was already there, leaning against a pillar, arms crossed. She looked different. Not in the way that time changes a person, but in the way regret does. "You came." She exhaled, pushing off the pillar and approaching me. "I did." My voice was stiff. "What is this about?" She hesitated before nodding toward the exit. "Come with me." "It's not something I can explain here." Against my better judgment, I followed her. The drive through the city felt surreal. The familiar streets, the cafes I used to frequent, the bookstore where I had found solace, it all blurred past the window. And then we pulled up to a house. Not Claire's. Not mine. A place I didn't recognize. "Claire," I started, but she cut me off. "Just trust me," she said, already getting out of the car. I nearly laughed at the irony of that statement. Trust her? After everything? But my feet moved anyway. I followed her through the front door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The living room was filled with people. Not strangers, familiar people. Aunt Lillian was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. A couple of old friends I had distanced myself from were standing awkwardly in the corner. And then my breath caught. Lucas. He stood near the fireplace, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My heart seized in my chest. "What?" My voice came out hoarse. "What is this?" Claire cleared her throat. "It's an intervention." My stomach dropped. "For me?" "No," she said softly. "For both of you." My gaze flickered to Lucas. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. He didn't look like a man who wanted to be here. I turned back to Claire, fury bubbling beneath my shock. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to bring me back and—" Claire lifted a hand, her expression uncharacteristically solemn. I know I don't deserve to meddle. But I messed up. We messed up." Her voice wavered. "And I need to try to make it right." I swallowed hard, emotions crashing over me in waves. "Claire." "I shouldn't have involved you in my mess," she interrupted. "I should have been honest with Lucas from the start. I should have never put you in that situation." Her eyes glistened. "And I sure as hell shouldn't have let you leave thinking you were the one who ruined everything." My throat felt tight. Claire turned to Lucas then. "And you." She sighed. "You fell for my sister, not me. You always have." I was just too selfish to admit it. Lucas flinched, but said nothing. I barely registered the murmurs from the others in the room. My focus was on him. The man I had betrayed, the man I had loved and walked away from, the man who had every right to hate me. I finally found my voice. "Lucas, I didn't expect to see you here." His gaze was unreadable. Neither did I. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, a painful, unspoken history lingering in the air. Aunt Lillian stood then, clearing her throat. "You two need to talk. No meddling, no games. Just talk." Claire nodded, stepping aside. "I'll give you space." The others followed her lead, slowly filing out of the room until it was just the two of us. I exhaled shakily. "Lucas, Why did you come back?" he interrupted, his voice rough. "Was it just because?" Claire asked. I shook my head. "No. I came because I needed to face what I left behind." I bit my lip, gathering my thoughts. "I ran away because I didn't know how to fix what I had broken. And I thought you'd never want to see me again." Lucas studied me, his expression still unreadable. "And what do you want now?" I hesitated. "I want to make things right." He let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Things aren't that simple." "I know," I admitted. But I also know that I never stopped. I cut myself off, my heart hammering. I never stopped caring about you. Lucas's eyes softened for the first time, but the hurt was still there. You let me believe you were someone else. You lied to me. I swallowed. I did. And I hate myself for it every day. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're not the only one who made mistakes. I was blind. I refused to see what was right in front of me. His lips twisted bitterly. Maybe I fell for you, but I also fell for the lie. I blinked back tears. Then let me show you the truth. He was quiet for a long time. Then finally he exhaled. I don't know if I can trust you again. Pain sliced through me, but I nodded. I understand. But if there's even the smallest chance, I'll fight for it. Lucas met my gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then I guess we see where this goes. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. And for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The door opened, and Claire peeked inside. So, are we celebrating or what? Lucas shot her a look, and I burst out laughing. It was raw, broken, but real. For the first time in forever, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had found my way home again. The weeks after the intervention were a whirlwind of emotions. I had convinced myself I could walk away clean, that I had made peace with the past. But being in that room with Lucas, facing him, hearing the pain in his voice, I knew I had been lying to myself. I spent days agonizing over our last conversation. He had left things open-ended, giving me the smallest sliver of hope, but I wasn't naive. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily restored. And after everything, I wasn't sure I deserved it. Claire had tried to reach out multiple times. I ignored most of her messages, unsure how to feel about her role in all of this. She had orchestrated the intervention, yes, but she had also caused the deception in the first place. Was she trying to make things right, or was this just another game to her? A month passed before Lucas reached out. A simple message. Meet me at the park. Noon. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw it. The park. Where we had first met. Where we had spent lazy afternoons walking in silence. Where he had once told me he felt most at peace. I debated not going, fearing whatever closure he sought might destroy me. But avoiding him wasn't going to change what had already happened. If there was even a shred of a chance that he and I could rebuild something, I had to take it. I arrived 5 minutes early, heart pounding. The air was crisp, the trees shedding their golden leaves. I spotted him instantly. He stood near the bench we always used to sit on, hands shoved into his pockets, staring at the lake. When I approached, he turned. For the first time since the intervention, he smiled. You came. I wasn't sure if I should. I exhaled sharply. But I'm here. Lucas nodded, motioning for me to sit. I hesitated before lowering myself onto the bench, leaving a cautious space between us. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The silence stretched, heavy but not suffocating. Then, finally, he broke it. I've been thinking, he started. About everything. About you, about Claire, about what happened.
He turned to look at me.
I was angry, and I had every right to be. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just angry at you. I was angry at myself. I swallowed, unsure what to say. I let myself be blind to the truth, he continued. I ignored the things that didn't add up. I let my feelings cloud my judgment. Maybe deep down, I always knew something wasn't right, but I didn't want to question it. I blinked back tears. Lucas. He shook his head. I'm not excusing what happened. But I also know you didn't do it to hurt me. He exhaled, looking back at the water. I don't want to hold on to this anger anymore. Hope flared in my chest, but I kept it contained. What does that mean? Lucas turned back to me, his expression unreadable. It means I don't hate you. It means I want to try to move forward. My breath caught. Move forward. His lips curled slightly. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. But I want to try. Tears welled in my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I let them fall. I want that too. Lucas reached out then, hesitating before brushing his fingers against mine. The touch was light, tentative, but it was enough. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a promise of love, of forever. But it was a beginning. And for now, that was enough. The weeks following our meeting at the park felt like stepping onto uncertain ground. There was no map, no script, only the fragile understanding that we were both willing to try. Lucas and I didn't jump straight into anything. Instead, we spoke in cautious words, exchanged tentative smiles, and let time mend what had been broken. Claire, sensing the shift, finally stopped pushing. I had allowed a single conversation with her, one filled with teary apologies and confessions of her own misguided loneliness, but our relationship would never be the same. And that was okay. Some things weren't meant to be fully repaired. Lucas and I took it slow. We started meeting for coffee, for walks, for moments that felt ordinary but carried an unspoken weight. Each interaction was a quiet question. Can we do this? And slowly, the answer was turning into yes. One evening, after a particularly long conversation over dinner, Lucas walked me to my door. There was a hesitation between us, a lingering space neither of us dared to cross just yet. "I think I finally understand," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Why I couldn't let go." I looked up at him, waiting. "It's not just the betrayal that hurt," he admitted. "It's the fact that despite it all, I still wanted you. I hated myself for it. I thought it meant I was weak or foolish." He shook his head. "But I don't think it's weakness to choose love, even when it's hard." Tears stung at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I was afraid to hope for this," I whispered. "I was afraid to want it." Lucas exhaled slowly before reaching for my hand. "Then let's stop being afraid." And just like that, the space between us closed. He kissed me, not with desperation, not with the reckless urgency of before, but with the quiet certainty of someone making a choice. A real choice. Months passed, and with them, a quiet transformation. It wasn't perfect. There were days when the past clawed at the edges of my mind, when doubt whispered cruelly in my ear. But each time, Lucas met me where I was, and together, we pushed forward. Claire and I remained distant but cordial. She had moved on, finding happiness in ways I hadn't expected. She even surprised me by sending an invitation to her engagement party. I wasn't sure if I'd go, but for the first time, I considered it. Life was far from the fairy tale endings I once dreamed of. It was messy and complicated, but it was real. And when Lucas looked at me, I no longer saw pain. I saw a future. On a quiet evening, as we sat watching the sunset from his balcony, he turned to me, fingers tracing idle patterns on my palm. "Tell me something," he said. "If you could go back and change things, make it so we met differently, so none of this happened, would you?" I thought about it, truly thought about it. Then, shaking my head, I smiled.
No.
Because then we wouldn't be us. Lucas's eyes softened, and he squeezed my hand. Then I guess we got our happy ending after all. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it.